Hi, folks. I'm Jamie Hiles.
I'm Lydia Judy.
I'm not a crook.
This is Green Bloody Movies, the podcast where we review a horror movie each week and go over the horror news. And guys, anything of significance happened today? We're recording this episode on May 30th, 2024, and I think it's a slow news day. If you know, you know.
Dunkin' Donuts was giving away free donuts this morning.
That's what it was.
Yeah,
That's
must
what
be
it was. That's nice. Yeah, I knew there was something. I was like, there's something important that's happening today. I mean, I do have some cool stuff with the horror news, and that you guys are going to blow your fucking minds. But, you know, how are you doing this afternoon before we get to that?
Doing good.
Pretty good.
I'm okay. Having a good day. Things are looking up in the world. That's all I can say. I'm convinced that it's a great day.
Ditto. One for the history books.
Indeed. So, guys, you guys want to talk about some horror news? Because I got some interesting stuff here.
Tell me.
Tell me more.
Oh my gosh.
Derek, even you know that movie, right?
I do, and I don't even like musicals.
I know.
That was
You
West
were
Side
like,
Story, right? That was a joke.
Get out of here.
I was joking.
Yeah, I know it was joking. He was like, that's the best black and white musical I've ever seen.
Oh my god. I'm telling you, if there's one joke about that, for this movie we watched today.
Well, for this podcast, that's number one right there. We'll see how many we can get.
Yep. All right. I'm going to start with the lower horror news and then build into the good shit, okay? I don't have a lot, but what I have is mighty. Guys, Eli Roth is starring in a Netflix thriller called Night Always Comes. That he's not directing. It's a adaptation of the 2021 novel written by Willie Vlotten. It stars Vanessa Kirby, which, first of all, fucking amazing. Eli Roth, Jennifer Jason Leigh, Zach Gottsagen, Stephen James, Julia Fox, Randall Park, and Michael Kelly. The film follows Lynette, a woman who risks everything to secure a future for herself and her brother by setting out on a dangerous odyssey in Portland. In doing so, confronting her own dark past over one propulsive night. I thought it was interesting that Eli Roth is, just an actor in this. What do you guys think?
I love it. That's hilarious.
Yeah. I mean,
That's interesting.
He's a good actor.
He is. He's done it before. A little movie called Inglourious Bastards comes to mind.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I think that sounds pretty fun.
Yeah.
I love Vanessa Kirby, by the way. She is in the new Mission Impossible movies, and she's great. Lydia, Derek, this is so cool. I got to tell you about it. I got to show it. I just got to share it with you guys. Got a new NECA toy. And guess what it is? It's our gang from American Werewolf in London.
Oh, that looks great.
Yeah, it is a 2-pack.
That is pretty sweet.
Look at that.
Man.
Oh my gosh, he's the best.
Dude, that would scare the bejesus out of most kids.
Look at that.
Ooh. That looks
Let's see.
awesome.
That is legit, man.
This is a great... And then look, there's the regular pack too. The regular heads.
Oh my gosh, what a good movie.
Yeah, one of the best, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it comes with different body or different jacket and different heads. So that's pretty freaking cool, right?
That is
so cool.
One of the coolest things I've seen all day, man.
It's one of the coolest toys, right? So you get a David and Jack.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if we get a price yet, but it looks like it's going to start shipping in October of this year. That might be one I need to add to the old collection. What do you guys think?
Definitely.
For
Definitely.
sure.
I wish we hadn't already done that movie so we could pick it again.
Yeah, no
It
kidding.
is great. It is great. So guys, this is some pretty fucking big news. You ready? Bill Skarsgård is going to return as Pennywise in Welcome to Derry.
Whoa.
Wow, they must have either The Crow did not do as well as he thought, and
Well, it's not
Call
out
Fright
yet.
Up, or
It's not out yet.
oh, it's not. Okay,
No.
still doesn't look that great. Or they were just like, they're like, you know what? We'll give him some money. That's
Well,
good
no,
news. He did a good job.
I think it boils down to we don't want anybody else to play Pennywise. I think they flirted with the idea of it because he wasn't announced. Remember, he wasn't attached to it.
Yeah.
And then I think they kind of came to their senses, like, huh, you know what? He is kind of Pennywise now. He's also going to executive produce as well.
Good for him.
So
Nice.
the series will begin in the 1960s, in the time leading up to the events of It Part 1. So
That is pretty cool.
Pretty cool,
And if
right?
you are going to intertwine with that trilogy. Is that a trilogy? No, the
Duology.
two-part
Yeah.
movie. Duology, there you go. You kind of have to use him if you're going to make that like part of the same universe.
yeah, I'm glad that he's back. I
news.
mean, he's fucking great in that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Guys, that's not even the biggest news. We also have this news. It's horror adjacent. Probably, we don't know yet. It's probably more sci-fi. But we have a 2026 release date, May 15th, 2026, for Steven Spielberg's next UFO movie, written by David Koepp, who wrote Jurassic Park.
Whoa.
Did you say Steven Spielberg?
Yes, the master
Ah.
of cinema himself, Steven Spielberg. Yes.
Dang.
Steven Spielberg, UFO movie, David Koepp. Oh my God. Right?
This could be
Yeah.
big.
It's an
That's
event movie,
pretty
is how's
crazy.
they're describing it. They're saying we'll be bringing an untitled original event film. All we know is that we know it's something to do with UFOs. And Steven Spielberg's track record with UFOs is fucking stellar. You know, we have Close Encounters of the Third Kind, my third favorite film of all time. We have War of the Worlds, incredible film, and a little gem called E.T. So
Mhm.
I'm stoked to see this, guys. Right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
That's so
And
exciting.
guys, that's not even the biggest news. See, I've been winding you up for this.
This is
because
too
here's
much
the
big
big news.
news.
Here's the biggest news. You ready? Oh, I want to sit here. Mike Flanagan is officially set to write and direct an all-new Exorcist movie.
What?
They had to
The
do that.
Mike
They
Flanagan.
absolutely had to do that. With the money they dropped on that franchise, they couldn't have afforded not to. What they did is they listened to our podcast and they were like,
Yeah.
those guys make sense.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
what we should do.
definitely.
Get Mike on the phone.
I mean,
'Cause
that's
I
who
know
we
we
pitched.
talked about that.
That's who we pitched for it immediately. I mean,
Yeah.
that's when after I told you, after I watched it, I was like, I think we need Mike Flanagan to do this. He'd be perfect. And then there was rumors that he was in talks. Remember? And so
Mhm.
now they can officially. It's not a sequel to Exorcist Believer either. It's supposedly it's a radical new take on The Exorcist.
Good.
It's
Let him
Flanagan
do
said in a
what he wants.
statement. His statement says, "The Exorcist is one of the reasons I became a filmmaker, and it's an honor to have a chance to try something fresh, bold, and terrifying within its universe. Reuniting with my friends at Blumhouse, with whom I've made some of my favorite pieces of work, only makes it more exciting." And then Jason Blum says, "Mike's voice and vision are indispensable for horror fans, and we are excited to welcome him back to Blumhouse. I immediately responded to Mike's new take on the world of The Exorcist and can't wait for audiences to experience it." So, yeah, basically the David
Good
Gordon
job,
Green
studios.
version is Outski, which, oh no, and we're getting this. So I mean, we have to do Exorcist Believer eventually, so you guys can see it, or so you guys can experience it and talk about it, and see what I went to the theater and watched. But I think this is just a huge upgrade. No offense to David Gordon Green, it's just this is a creator and material kind of meshing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know David. I'll insult it, and I'm not going to insult him. But man, you had, dude, you had the world in your hands, and you just like squeezed it until it popped in your face. I guess I don't know. That's the best analogy. I can
Like a
remember.
big zit.
Like a big zit. I don't know. It's like he was on a unicycle and he didn't know how to ride it, and he fell off.
Well, that is
I'm
known to
full of
happen to
stuff.
anybody.
Yeah. Except for
Yep,
clowns,
you
they're
are
good
full
at
of
it.
you are full of stuff. I'll agree with that.
I'm so full of stuff.
Oh my god! And that wraps up the horror news. So I've been sitting on that news for a day. I almost texted you guys about it yesterday, but I was like, no, must hold off for the horror news, so that way they are shocked about it.
Genuine reaction occurred.
Yeah, and
But
sometimes
that's
I
great
break
news
these.
for them.
Sometimes I break these stories to Derek early on our daily phone calls, but I
Yeah.
didn't. I didn't even broach the subject. I just was like, I'm just gonna wait. I think the guys deserve to get a genuine reaction for this one because this is as big as it gets in our realm. I mean, the only thing that'd be bigger is if they're like, we got a new Freddy Krueger movie coming out, and we'd be like, and
Right.
they're like, also a new Jason and a new Michael Myers all the same day.
It's kind of how today feels a little bit, honestly.
It does. We're just getting
Yeah.
bombarded with great news.
Right? Like, honestly.
It just doesn't stop. I'm having a great day. Oh man, I'll give you 34 reasons why today is fantastic.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Speaking of the 30s, we're going to travel back to 1931 when sound films were a brand newish thing. And guess what? Guess what the world had never seen yet? A talking supernatural horror film until Todd Browning's 1931 Dracula, which we are going to talk about today. So guys, tell me about your experience with Dracula. Lydia, let's start with you.
Dracula is life.
No, blood is the life, Mr. Renfield. Blood is the life.
I love Dracula. I don't remember the first time I saw it because it's one of those movies that's just in the air. It's just
As
when
always.
you're born, you just know it.
Uh-huh.
And
It's a nebulous thing. Yeah.
I have a lot of actually I actually got in a drunk fight one time about how much I love Dracula.
What?
Yeah, I just kind of went off on a friend of just like, no, I love Dracula. Just was being completely ridiculous. But I've got the shirt, I've got a tattoo like Nosferatu. I've got the books. I got the movies. I just started losing my mind about how much I love Dracula. So I actually, since we've been doing Vampire Month or whatever, I watched more vampire movies like on my own than we've even watched like on here. So I'm gonna be sad when it's over, but I had fun watching this one for the millionth time.
Great. How about you, Derek?
So I have never seen this movie.
Really?
Yep, this was the first watch for me. Although I will say, it seemed so familiar. But it's a first watch for me.
Okay.
Oh yeah, I bet it felt really familiar after last week.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, there's, sprinkled into, and we're going to get into it, but sprinkled into every movie about Dracula are essences, like an essence of this movie. It inspired.
Correct.
I mean, it's unmeasurable how much it's inspired.
Yeah, so Dracula for
Definitely.
me, I've seen Dracula. I mean, I don't remember like you, Lydia. I don't quite remember the very first time I watched Dracula, but I remember one of the first times I remember watching it fully was in my because like I said, I'd seen them as little kids here, but when I was about wanting to say 12 or so, I remember Turner Classic Movies was having it was Halloween night, and they were showing, because you have to remember back in those days it wasn't like now where we can just search for Dracula and I can rent it anywhere, right? You had to go to the video store to try to find it, or if you didn't own a copy of it, that's all you had to do, or find it, hope it was on TV at some point. So Turner Classic Movies was airing Dracula, the original Dracula, and Frankenstein that night as part of their Halloween package, right? Because they were showing the Hammer Draculas and stuff during the day leading up to it, and then the night ended with Frankenstein and Dracula double bill. And I remember eat my candy and stuff and be like, "Oh, I want to watch this so the classic monster movies." And I watched it, watched both of them, of course, and loved them because I had forever. But then I got really into Dracula, this movie particularly, in high school. I bought the DVD, which I have over there. It's like the 2-disc collector's edition bookcase DVD of this movie, and just like kind of studied it because of its place in horror history. Because that was when my journey, like full journey of being a filmmaker, started, was around that time. A horror movie filmmaker, especially. And I was going through my horror 101 stuff, and getting all my basics. And this one had a big, influence on me. And there was actually a period in time where I used to watch this to fall asleep to every night. So it was like a comfort movie as well. But a little bit of backstory on Dracula. Guys, like I said, I have that DVD. It has some great features, and it has some great commentaries that talk about the making of this thing. But the biggest thing is this. Dracula was the first supernatural talking horror movie. It's the first real horror movie. In the 1920s, the Lon Chaney era, you had movies with horror elements. The Phantom of the Opera and Hunchback of Notre Dame have horror elements, right, because of the grotesque makeup. But they're not horror movies. This was the first horror movie of what we would consider a modern horror movie. You had especially a talking horror movie. And this movie definitely feels like an early, like the sound and stuff. They're figuring out sound. They're figuring it out. But so our genre kind of exists because Dracula came out and was a fucking huge hit. Like, I mean, this thing came out, guys, and it was like, boom, it blew up. So much so that they immediately greenlit Frankenstein, which was going to star Bela Lugosi as the monster. Because he was their big star. But he declined it because he didn't want to be under heavy makeup. He didn't want to be unrecognizable. And, of course, Boris Karloff did that and became a fucking icon. So, now you win some, you lose some. But Bela Lugosi is Dracula. I mean, right?
Yeah,
right.
For sure.
So, yeah. Do you guys want to start with that? You guys want to start with talking about Lugosi's Dracula?
Sure.
Go ahead, Derek. You haven't seen this. Tell us your impression of Lugosi's Dracula, especially knowing it, but now seeing it in action.
Wait, first of all, Derek, what color was this movie?
Damn it, Lydia. I told you. I'm out, guys. So here's my take on it. It is a rare occasion, especially in the media of movies, that you get to be the first of anything. You know what I mean? And like to set a path that led us to all that we have now. That's tremendous. I mean, that's historical. His influence can be seen in every iteration, like a tiny bit. of every iteration of Dracula. Watching this movie, actually, I wish that we would have flip-flopped the movies.
I do
wish we would
too.
have watched this
Yeah.
one
I
first,
do too. Yeah.
and then Dracula Dead and Loving It, because you would have seen more of like the
You would get more of the jokes. Yeah.
yeah, the cobweb thing,
Yeah.
the spider web. Like, I wish that would have happened, but that obviously didn't. But even like in the lines, there were lines from this movie in the Dracula movie that we watched with Keanu Reeves and
Mm-hmm.
Gary Oldman. So its influence is just profound. But he set the bar. When do you get to say that?
Yeah. Not often. Yeah.
No.
Yeah. He's I mean, I know how you feel, Lydia. His performance is great. Right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I love
I mean,
him.
it's great.
Very
He's-
confident.
Yeah. So he
definitely came
changed
across.
he changed the image of Dracula, because in Stoker's novel, Dracula is an old man and he's gross, and as he drinks blood he gets younger, but he's still like a gross person. And then they wrote the play. So this movie is based on the play based off of Stoker's novel. It's kind of very confusing,
Mhm.
right? So how it shakes out is Hamilton Dean and John Balderston ran a play on Broadway, a Dracula, big production of Dracula on Broadway, and they cut it down to where it basically was mostly set in the drawing room, because they didn't have, you couldn't do these lash chases across the Carpathian Mountains and shit. And then they had other actors playing Dracula, of course. But then once they cast Bela Lugosi for the Broadway play, changed everything, because his interpretation of the character was younger and suave and sexy, right? I mean, the sexy vampire comes from Bela Lugosi, who women find attractive. I mean, he's dark and handsome, and he's got an accent. He's smooth. He's all those things that now every iteration of Dracula, unless they're like, well, we want to do the Gary Oldman Dracula, but even Oldman's Dracula becomes young and hot at one point,
Mm-hmm.
and he pulls that from Lugosi, So it's like his influence over the character of Dracula, kind of like Karloff's influence of the Frankenstein monster is like paramount.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
paramount.
Mm-hmm.
When you say, "Hey, draw me a picture of Dracula," you draw Bela Lugosi, pretty much.
Mhm.
You draw with the cape, with the medallion. That's Dracula. That's your Dracula.
Mhm.
So yeah, Derek, you obviously this was your first time seeing this movie, so you kind of knew what the basic plot was anyway from the millions of Draculas that we've seen, especially since we watched Dracula Dead and Loving It, which kind of follows this exact plot.
Yeah.
Dude, in every one of those like jokes when he's in the theater and he's talking to the usher,
Yeah.
he's like, and afterwards you will remember nothing, and I just couldn't help but just flash back to and
No, it's the best.
tell them that, and you will remember nothing, and she
Yeah.
forgets. It's
Well, you
great.
will get no tip. No tip? Ah, that you remember.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
when he cuts gets a paper cut on his finger, and I was just
I
laughing,
couldn't-
just thinking of.
Dude, what's great is so during that scene, let's talk about Dwight Fry real fast as Renfield, because he's
Oh,
fucking brilliant.
So amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't he so good? Especially
so good.
Good.
when he's in the ship and they open it up when he's gone mad and he's doing that. It's pretty
Yeah.
effectively creepy. Pretty effectively creepy.
Yeah. He's
Yeah,
so intense.
He
Yeah.
is intense, and it makes not seeing this movie before, I had no reference for Renfield outside of what I've seen in more modern movies. So
Mhm.
to watch this, you get a new perspective. Like I don't want to take anything away from the actor that we saw in last week's movie, because I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
he did a phenomenal job.
Oh yeah,
at,
he's parodying this one. Yeah.
100%. And so
Yeah.
that that says volumes about his performance, because his performance was really good as well.
Yeah,
He did a great job. And you're right, like that laugh. And it might have come along without this movie anyway, but I think back to movies that have a laugh similar to that. And I'm just like, did they get that from this? Because,
It's
it was
so
great.
unsettling. It's like something
Yeah.
that's so unsettling about it. They're like, you
he's
really
gone
don't.
mad. Yeah.
Yeah, like
I
he's
think when I go
actually gone
upstairs,
mad.
I'm going to stand in the doorway because Quincy's going to be asleep, and I'm going to go, and see what happens.
I promise
Luckily,
you,
we don't have
probably
guns
be
in my
good.
house.
She'll probably faint like that, like the maid does.
The maid, yeah. Yeah, he's great. And the other one I want to talk about is Edward Van Sloan as Van Helsing, because he's also awesome. He's
is
so
pretty
good.
awesome.
Right? I
Yep.
love Van Helsing in this. This is like the first prototype of Van Helsing. I love how scholarly he is.
Yeah. I had to rewind it like 3 or 4 times, and I turned on captions just so that I could like soak it all in. There's a great line in this movie, and it's after the mirror scene with the the cigar box or the cigarette box. So disgusting. But anyway,
Yeah.
so he turns and looks at him and is like, you have not yet lived a lifetime, and you are like wise beyond your years. I'm watching it. But
Yeah.
I was like, man, that's good writing. I like
Yeah.
that.
The line is, for a man who hasn't lived a single lifetime, you are very wise, Van Helsing.
Yeah.
I love that scene too.
Lugosi's performance in that moment too, when he sees it and slaps it out, and you just see like the rage in his face for a moment, and then he composes himself, is so good. My favorite is the line reading of the other actors, where first, Jonathan Harker in this movie is a nothing character.
Yeah.
Which is 100% what they based Steven Weber's Harker on, just a nothing character. I think that was the joke.
Yeah.
But he's a nothing character. He's just there to like say things like, he looked like a deranged animal. A deranged animal, more like a madman.
Yeah, exactly. He's kind of almost forgettable. He's just like a handsome face, and that's it.
He's the handsome romantic lead. They needed those in those movies back then. We still do, but usually they're have layered. They're a little more layered. But yeah, he's just David Manners is who plays Jonathan Harker in this, and has a thankless role because they changed Renfield's. They gave Renfield Harker's role from the novel of traveling to Dracula's castle, because in the novel Renfield is already mad in the asylum. But they changed it there because they thought this is where that came from. By the way, Renfield traveling is from here, from this movie, because they're like, oh, it would make more dramatic sense for us to see him before he goes mad than to see the Count turn him mad. And we get some great stuff with Renfield and Dracula in the castle. We get some of our classic lines. We get "I never drink wine." We get "Listen to them, children of the night." We get an awesome push in of Dracula when he pricks his finger, and we just push in on him. We get a couple of great Dracula push ins. Like also when he the first time we see Dracula, and he's standing there, and we do that fucking push in on him. This movie was shot by Karl Freund, who was a classic German expressionist cinematographer who would later go on to direct The Mummy for Universal several years later. There's stories that he ghost directed the film. That's also been countered with no, Todd Browning directed the movie. He just took a lot of input from Freund, who is a master cinematographer. So they kind of combined to give us this movie. And what do you guys think of the way it's shot for 1931? The lighting and cinematography.
It's more dynamic. I would imagine that the cameras back then were like just silly big, but there are a couple of like transition, like they're moving, and
they're on dolly tracks. There's a lot of dolly shots. There's a lot of there's a couple of crane shots in the movie that are pretty good. There's also some good staging and blocking. this movie sometimes gets criticized for the creakiness of it in the staging, and there are some slow staging, but it's 1931,
Yeah.
and Todd Browning came from directing silent films to trying to direct his first. He's trying to direct these talkies, which is not the first talkie he did, but I mean, he's breaking ground on a new genre. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah.
But
There,
some of the
shot.
staging.
Yeah,
Go ahead. Oh, I was going to say
The
some of the
shot-
stage. Go ahead.
The shot where he's it shows him like in the coffin and it like pans over to the door and then like back to the coffin. It's like that would never happen today, but I bet it was so effective.
It was, and I think it was
so
also
scary. It's just
so they
quiet.
didn't. Yeah, it's quiet. That's the other thing. This movie doesn't have a score because this is before they started putting non-diegetic music into movies. It's before the movies had scores themselves. Besides when you're watching a silent movie and it's a live orchestra playing it or a live organist.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So that's why Frankenstein's the same way. It doesn't have a score. But you know what does? Bride of Frankenstein, a couple years later, has a big orchestral score. Because they're like, oh, yeah, this is how movies, moving pictures were a new medium, and talking pictures were a brand new medium. We're only 130 years into movie making, guys. Still, right now, it's in infancy still. So it's like they're baby stepping their way out of this thing, right?
Yep.
But some of the staging is actually pretty effective, I think. Like when they're in the castle, the way he staggers the actors to move, and then has, it's kind of a oneer. It's a wide shot, and then he moves, and then he has Renfield move, and then we move the camera with Renfield I'm like, that's pretty good. That's pretty good staging, especially for 1931. That's pretty solid staging. But yeah, the lack of score is, there's actually a version of this that's released with the score, which we actually feature in our short film. I Saw What I Saw. We used the version with the score because we wanted to score the scene. We did an experiment where we didn't want to use any non-diegetic music in it. So that movie has no score, just a couple of sound effect stingers. But we didn't do like a traditional score. So there's a version of this with the score written by Philip Glass, which is a pretty solid version, but the original is the way to go.
So, funny story. The only experience I did have with this movie was when we put it in the opening of Ours, and that obviously had a score. So, like, in that opening scene, I kept waiting for the score to kick in. And I'm like, man, it's not there. It's not there. And then after that, I, like, completely was just like, oh, whatever. And then I didn't even realize the movie didn't have a score at all, which is not nearly as bad as realizing that it wasn't in, it wasn't in color, which I did notice that.
Well, it's because the pacing of it moves along pretty decently. It doesn't languish on scenes. It doesn't languish on scenes. Like, we kind of get out at a decent clip, because we're in Dracula's castle, or we get the opening, which, by the way, had my favorite fucking guy of all time, my favorite bit part actor, Wolves in Bats. I love that fucking guy. The best.
You're ridiculous. And we have the ability for hindsight, right? That's the only, and I don't want to call it a knock because it's the original. That's the only thing I wish this movie had was a little bit more like fleshing out of the scenes. You know what I mean? Because knowing how other people interpreted those scenes, you have an expectation of how like the development of this should go. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was actually
you're waiting for the scene to finish.
Yeah.
But it doesn't finish because that's where they went with it originally.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was kind of picturing like what it would look like if it was like if you could take these people, like the same look and everything, the same feel and everything, and just have a new age camera like shooting it. Like just imagine how like scary that would still, like how it would still be scary today. with
Yeah,
with the
I
same
mean,
actors and the same, just add a score and a nice, new age camera. Like,
yeah.
it
So
would
I,
be
I think
terrifying.
I think the black and white photography does a lot of lifting in this movie. I think it needs to be black and white for sure.
Yeah.
Um, so I love the black and white photography in it, especially when the special effect that they use for. I mean, because Bela Lugosi's got such a striking face, and his eyes are very. He's got very great eyes. So to use that streak of light across them, and the rest of him's dark, and he's just kind of lit here, is pretty powerful
Awesome.
for that day. Yeah. We
I
also
want to
get
do
one of my
that.
favorite bits that I've always loved. I know it's fucking corny, but I love it when he says, uh, when he's traveling to Dracula's castle and he goes to check on the driver and it's a bat flying the fucking.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. I just think that's great. Right? That's fun. That's
Well,
fun.
then when they get there, he's gone,
Yeah.
and so is his luggage.
Yeah. Everything's gone. Like, I mean, can you
Mhm.
imagine you pull up to that? Also, what's funny is so all of the creatures that are running around, like, so rats, they wanted to use rats, but rats were considered taboo in 1931. So they found other ugly creatures like possums and, you know what I mean? Like other creatures of the night to fill it in, the creepy crawlies. Which is so funny if you think about, like, the restrictions they had too, because this movie was made before the Hays Code went in effect. And for years, the ending of this movie was actually altered slightly. So when Van Helsing stakes him, uh, in the Hays Code version, when Van Helsing stakes him, we don't hear Dracula scream.
Oh.
So they cut out the scream. So it just, he starts to, and we don't see the stake. We see him start to, and then it just cuts to the other scene, which blunts its impact because we need to hear his, since if we don't see his demise, we need to hear it at least. Right?
Mm-hmm.
But so let's talk about some of the, I guess, for lack of the kills and scare scenes in this. Like, what do you guys think of, like, him with, him with Lucy, all the stuff with him and Lucy?
And Lucy is the other one, right? That's not Nima or Nina or whatever.
Mina, yeah, yeah,
Mina.
yeah. Yes.
So that's one of those things I was talking about. Like, the expectation was preset, and so, like,
Yeah.
I expected it to be more flushed out, and it wasn't. And really, the only callback that we get to her being a vampire is the fact that Nina sees her, which we don't see, and talks with her, and then, like, it's
And
just
then we
in
see a
reference when
newspaper. Yeah, we see
Yeah.
a newspaper article about the woman in white. Correct.
Yeah.
We gloss over that whole arc because
Yeah.
they couldn't show in 1931, I guess, them beheading and stabbing her with the stake. I suppose.
And like gallons and gallons of blood spraying
Yeah.
everywhere.
Now there is a great bit. There's some great shots of Dracula in the room with her and with Mina. Like I love when he, like, flies in from the window as the bat, and then we cut to him and he's got the cape up and everything. He just looks great. He looks like $1 million.
He does. It does fall a little short of Leslie Nielsen's head on a tiny
Yeah.
bat running into a window, but
Yeah, I mean, the bat itself
I'll let
is
it pass.
horrible, of course. It's 1931.
Yeah.
It's a rubber bat on a fucking string. But, hey, you got to do what you got to do.
Yeah.
Especially when
he's
they're on the terrace.
He's like chasing it. Yeah, he's chasing it away, and he's like, "Man, that's kind of a big bat."
I like when he goes,
It's like gigantic.
I like when he's like, watch out, doesn't get in your hair. As he's like swinging it.
Oh man, that made me laugh because
Yeah.
she's just like answering the bat because it's talking to her, and he's like, "What did you
Yeah,
say?"
giving her instructions. Yeah,
Careful. Yeah.
One of my favorite scenes in this movie is Dracula and Van Helsing's confrontation in the parlor.
Probably my favorite scene. One of them. It's good.
Tell me about it, Derek. 'Cause this is your first time seeing it. What did you think?
It was it was great because they were more like he was his mortal equal in essence, because there's a point where Dracula's trying to put him in a trance and get him to do what he wants, and he starts to, and then he stops and backs up, and he makes a comment about how strong-willed he was. So it's a really good. It sets up the conflict very well.
That's
I
my
think. And they
favorite
played
piece of
really
acting
well
in the
on
movie.
each other.
Yeah,
Yeah, and just he's a well-traveled professor who knows a little bit about a lot of stuff, and so he already knows, which I think is really cool or interesting, that it's wolfsbane instead of garlic.
Yep, that's
But he
originally
knows that
wolfsbane.
is,
Yep.
yeah, which would have been a really cool like transition, or not transition, but carry over to like the Wolfman. Like if they were to have intertwined this, to been like that is the one thing that all the creatures of the night don't like, or whatever. Anyway,
Derek,
they
whenever... do intertwine those, by the way, just so you know.
Do they?
There's a bunch of Monster Mash movies in the late 50s, yeah.
Well, I mean, later.
Universal monster movies.
Yeah, I know, but is it? I think that element would have been cool if they would have had like more hindsight to put that in the original Wolfman. Either way, but it's a really great scene because it sets up the antagonist to Dracula. You know what I mean? And so it's well done, and the dialogue, like I already mentioned it, the dialogue is great. I loved it. I turned the captions on so I could read it and make sure I was getting it all.
Dude, I love
true story.
Edward von Sloan's acting choice when he's starting to when Dracula's telling him to come here, and he's like just the way he's like zombified and starts to step, and then you see his eyes stop glassing over, and he steps back in like determination. You're like, that's a fucking great acting, actually, pretty fucking solid.
Yeah, and I love his little glasses.
His little glasses are great. Yeah. Yeah, he rules. He's a great Dracula, or a great Van Helsing. And I love also in that scene, I love their dialogue. Also in that scene, Derek, I do love their dialogue when they're talking about when he's like, if I can save not only her soul, but maybe even her life if she dies by day. But I'll be sure that she dies by night. And you're like, so you get like how evil and awful he is.
For sure, and I'm sure that this was pushing the envelope for 1931.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we talked about it when we watched probably The Wolfman. Like, it's hard to put yourself in that position because we're so saturated with, the things that we experience through movies, since we were kids. So it's hard to really get a grasp of what that impact was like.
Yeah.
Would have been really cool to see it for the first time.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So the ending of this movie, I think, is the weakest part of this movie. Because it wraps up super fast. Real
quick.
Yeah.
Blink and you'll miss it.
We do get the
I literally missed it.
Yeah. We get the great, that great scene with a couple of great moments with Renfield. Like, I love the Dracula. I never even heard the name before.
Yes.
One of my favorites.
Yeah.
Yes.
Fucking cracks me up.
Real scared.
Yep. And then I also love I love how he leads them to them, and we get Dracula cold-bloodedly murdering him is pretty brutal for 1931. He snaps his neck and throws him down the stairs.
That's what I would have done.
That's pretty
has been
brutal.
Tainted by the spiders.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. It made me think of the other movie where he's like, torture me.
Yeah. I don't have time for this, Renfield.
My mind went back to the courtyard where he's like, I lost it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the best. Yeah. But yeah, the actual ending is so fast and wraps up there's no tension really. I mean, they're trying to build tension, but it's not letting it breathe enough, so the stakes aren't clear. I mean, they do spell it out in that scene with Dracula and Van Helsing what the stakes are, but I don't feel like we as audience members get a true grasp of what the stakes are, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, you never really get that ending conflict, right?
Correct.
'Cause
It happens
the ending,
real
he's
easy.
just in the coffin and he's asleep, and they open up and tear his lid into pieces to get a steak, and you're just like, dude's a hard sleeper.
Yeah.
Even though
He
it's
had a rough-
daytime, hard sleeper.
He had a rough night. He had a rough night.
Yeah.
He got indicted 34 times. It was rough.
I'm gonna sleep it off. But yeah, so there's no real conflict there, and I feel like that was a miss. But again, it's hard to fault them because this is their first real venture into that. So
Yeah, I think that's a directing and editing issue. I really do, because I think in the script there probably is conflict as far as there's a ticking clock. There's kind of a ticking clock, is what they're supposed to be. They could have shown us a better job of, hey, time is running out. The sun is about to rise. If we don't kill Dracula by the end of sundown or by sunrise, then Mina's soul is lost forever and she is forever a vampire. If we would have had those stakes more clearly drawn out and we would have had shots of the sun or of the sky, seeing that it's close, then I think the tension would have played better, right?
Yeah, I mean, even in Nosferatu,
Mm-hmm.
which I don't know if everyone had access to that movie at this time.
No,
Right.
because it was
You know
actually
about that?
banned at this time.
Right,
Because
okay, so
of
that makes
copyright.
sense.
Copyright, it was banned. Because
Mhm.
they, made fucking Dracula without consulting Bram Stoker's estate.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
But yeah, there's just the tension's kind of the stakes aren't clear and the tension's lacking. So even if we don't get a final confrontation with Dracula, if we had more than just them saying, well, we searched everywhere. Where is it? If we actually saw them searching a couple places and we see the sun going down, then by the time they find Dracula, we get their stakes and we get the feeling of the tension. That's, I think, it's just kind of laissez-faire, right? It's just kind of like, blah, there he is. Let's kill him, I guess.
Which is strange from a director that was directing silent films. You would think they would have a pretty good grasp of how to make people feel things, like even...
Well, and he does in other scenes, right? He makes us feel the tension of Mina about to get bit or Lucy about to get bit. He makes us feel the tension of Dracula and Van Helsing facing off. He does do that. It's just this ending. I feel like they were like, let's just... And there might be stuff that was kind of cut probably too, but it's like, we'll just kind of wrap this up, chop, chop, let's go. And it feels like just a little rushed at the end.
Yeah, it definitely
which is
does.
That's the most, because it's literally, he kills our greatest villain in basically cinema history, especially up to that point, off screen. We just hear him scream, and then Mina's just like, "Oh, Jonathan, you're here," and then they walk out while Dr. Van Helsing's looking at him, and that's kind of it. What do you guys think of Mina, by the way?
She's aight.
yeah, I'm with Lydia. Yep.
Yes, I agree. She's okay.
I don't think she's super memorable. Like, I've watched this movie a lot of times, and I saw her, and I was like, I don't even really remember her vividly.
Yeah,
but...
it's Helen Chandler is who plays her, and she's fine. It's just that she her line deliveries are kind of interesting, kind of weird.
Yeah.
It's just a voice really is kind of different, and when she's talking about the one that I always think about is when she's talking about the night, and he's like, "Well, last week you said you were scared of the night." "Oh, why would I ever say such a silly thing, John? I love the night. It's so great." You're like, okay. Yeah, weird, but all right. And of course, the fact that I do think they're good in the scene where her and Lucy are together, and she's like, does the Bela Lugosi impression, and then she's like, "Oh, well, Countess, I'll leave you to it. That stuff, that's pretty good. And then let's talk about the comic relief characters, which is Martin and the housemaid. What do you guys think of them? I think Martin's actually pretty great. You old fly eater.
Okay, yeah.
He is. He's
Yeah.
he's a member. I mean, for the short amount of time that he has, he's also very memorable. So, and he's he brings some comic relief to it, just in like the character itself. So it worked. I liked him. He threw his spider
I think
out.
he's good too.
Ugh, that's like his steak, man.
I know.
He was upgrading from flies to spiders, and he threw it out. I'd have bit his nose
love
off.
that
Can you
he's like-
imagine grabbing the spider by the leg and just being like,
Yeah. I love when he says, he's like, I like the way that line is too. It's really funny. He's like, flies? Flies? Who wants to eat flies? You do, you loony. Not when you can have nice, fat, juicy spiders. All right, have it your way. He also has the great line where he's like, she goes, he's crazy. They're all crazy. They're all crazy except you and me. And sometimes they have me doubts about you. Yes. And he like backs away from her.
she says yes.
He's like, ah. But yeah, they're memorable characters. And we got to talk about the brides. How great is their look when they come in? I love the way they look like these kind of like wispy brides.
Like haunting.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
they don't
I
have
love,
a lot of play.
I love Dracula. I love Dracula waving them away, opening it with the fog bellowing behind him, and he just waves them away to feed on Renfield. In the novel, he says, "This man is mine," but in this one, they cut that line because 1930, you don't want to be too homo friendly, so
Right.
there, he just waves him away. Which Todd Browning, by the way, was a heavy drinker at this time, so he had just gotten into a car accident shortly before. That's why there was rumors about him ghost directing this, essentially. But because you knew who he wanted as the original Dracula, Lon Chaney. So he wanted Lon Chaney to play Dracula, who Lon Chaney was the biggest box office draw in the world at the time. But then Lon Chaney died of throat cancer in 1929. And before they could, start filming on this, and then Bela Lugosi lobbied for this part. He wrote to Universal. He wrote to the directors. He had the cast members of the play people writing to him. He had Bram Stoker's widow writing recommendation letters for him for this role, and he got it, and changed his life. So it's pretty great. It couldn't have been anybody else. It was always meant to be Bela Lugosi.
Agreed.
That's Dracula, guys. Anything else you want to talk about?
I don't. It's good. It's a good movie. It's a good watch. Wish I would have watched it sooner.
Tell us about this experience for you, Derek, and your rating of the movie and everything. Were you surprised?
I
by
have
how
to
much
go
you liked
first.
It? Were you surprised by how much you liked it?
I was not really. No, I wasn't, because the movie it felt so familiar. So I guess I'm not a big fan of older movies. I feel like they feel more like stage performances. This one didn't have that feeling, which it's credit to the actors and probably the way that it was shot from the cinematographer. But no, it was really entertaining. I wish I would have I was kind of rushed in watching it. I'll watch this again. I will probably watch it with Clark because it's tame enough. Like when we get around Halloween, I don't know that he'll be able to sit through it, to be honest with you.
Yeah, no, it's probably a little slow, but we'll see. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's tame enough that you could introduce that to, or something like this to, a younger person, and that would be a great foundation. Just, later on, be like, oh yeah, I saw this movie and they copied from this movie, instead of the opposite. If you're just a layman and you're like, oh, I've seen this 100 times. Well,
Yeah.
this is the first time.
Also, it would be a good barometer of where he is as far as on horror movies, like what scares him, what doesn't. Yeah.
Yeah, so I've said this before, and you got to give something like this, you got to grade it on a curve at least a little bit. I'm going to give this movie a 9 because
Oh,
it's a solid movie, and you can't watch a vampire movie without seeing its influence, and that carries a lot of weight, in my opinion.
Lydia, what do you think?
I think I also have to give it a 9. I want to just give it a 10 just because I love it so much, but it's definitely like, the ending feels rushed, and it's not a perfect movie. It's just,
No.
a historical movie, and it is special. It's just special.
Yeah, I agree with that. I feel that same way because I don't think it's a perfect movie either. I think that there's things that are a little creaky about it. Feel the age on some stuff. It's a little creaky. The pace is a little slower, but I think it also at the same time moves along pretty quickly because we go from scene to scene. I think what makes it feel slow is I think some scenes just go on a little longer than they should, and then some other scenes move by like the pacing of them is how they should be. I think it's more acting choice and kind of frame it, just like okay, ba 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 ba, instead of faster and more intense, as George Lucas would say. Um, but I'm right there with you guys. I'm going to give it a 9 as well. This is my favorite Universal monster movie. I don't think it's the best Universal monster movie. We haven't done that one yet. And I think Frankenstein is a better movie than this as well, because of the filmmaking techniques they did for Frankenstein in 32 are just like fucking wild for 1932. James Whale's at another level. But this is my favorite because I like the tone of it, and I like the character of Dracula a lot, especially as played by Lugosi, and I like Von Sloan's Van Helsing a lot. I think he's such a strong character. So yeah, this one is my favorite Universal monster movie. So yeah, it's a 9 for me as well.
Swept.
And that is wrapping up Vampireville. I think that's what we're calling it. That's what I'm going to call it now.
Yeah,
Village of the Vamps.
Vampireville.
We didn't really. Well, yeah, I guess we did do the whole month.
Yep, we did the whole month. And we bookended it with the first talking vampire film. So that wraps up our vampire coverage for a while. But before we move on to what we're watching next week, Lydia, who would Tom Atkins play in this movie?
Probably
Jonathan Harker, and he'd make him way better. Way better.
There we go. You're right.
Right, Derek?
Yeah. I mean, anybody would have been. I mean, unfortunately, he just didn't have a
lot
part.
to do. Yeah, he had a lot to do.
He definitely would have been the ladies' man. We all know that.
Well, we know that Mina wouldn't be like, "Oh, John." She'd be like, "Oh, John."
Yeah, she'd be like, "Dracula, go away.
Yeah.
That's my man."
He's like, "Come with me, Mina. I will show you the night." I see the night every night with Tom Atkins. I'm good to go. He takes me on the mustache rides all the time.
Oh my gosh.
So, Lydia, what are we watching next week?
Okay, so I kind of want to keep it in the past. Blast from the past. But I'm thinking more of like, I want more of like summer vibes because it's getting nice out, and I kind of want, a little bit of, if you just wanted to go hang out in a spooky lagoon, maybe we could go with
Oh,
Creature from the Black Lagoon.
okay. So we're definitely staying in the past. All right. We're doing Jack Arnold's Creature from the Black Lagoon. Let's see where that is streaming.
It was really hard for me not to pick another vampire movie.
Well, I'm glad that you did not. It is looks like it's available on for rent on Amazon Prime, Google Play, Fandango at Home, YouTube, and Apple TV. 1954, Jack Arnold's Creature from the Black Lagoon. It's a good one. We're getting into the 50s, so we're getting more into 50s sci-fi B movie horror with this. It's a different vibe completely. You have your cycles. This is in the back half of the cycle of Universal monster movies. Your first cycle is your Frankenstein, or your Dracula, your Frankenstein, your Dracula's daughter, Bride of Frankenstein, all the way up to pretty much Wolfman.
Count Chocula? Is that in there?
And then you start to get into your B movies.
Oh, now I want some Count Chocula, Derek. Why did you say that?
Count Chocula is legit. I love it.
Please.
I love Count Chocula.
Me too.
So, guys, Derek, do you have a story for us tonight?
Man, I knew you were going to ask that.
And you didn't think of one? That's called bad preparation.
I was trying to think of one. I can tell you a really wholesome story.
Oh, okay.
It's a cute one.
Doesn't sound very really funny.
Cute. Clark, we got a couple of them, so 6-year-olds are so funny. Clark got new toothpaste because his old toothpaste ran out, and it says Spider-Man. And so last night before he went to brush his teeth, he was like, "Does this taste like spider webs?" It's Spider-Man toothpaste. It was really cute. And then the other one is I bought him a strawberry milk, which is my personal favorite. And he's drinking it. Yep. He's like, "Dad, do cows have make strawberry milk?" And I'm like, "No." And then I had to explain the process to him. And anyway, their minds and how they work, just really cute.
That's funny. All right, guys, that will wrap up this. It's great stories.
I'm also about to fall asleep over here, so
I noticed.
My eyes are getting real heavy.
That wraps up this edition of Scream Bloody Movies and Vampire Week or Vampire Month or Vampire Quarter, whatever the fuck it was. Stay tuned next week when we do Jack Arnold's Creature feature. This is one of the early Creature features. Creature from the Black Lagoon. So this will be a lot of fun. I haven't seen this in a long time. So it'll be fun to check it out again. This movie was actually originally released in 3D, by the way.
Really?
So, yeah, how cool. So stay tuned for that. And we'll have an announcement on the movie very soon. We are this close to being done with the editing. We have picture lock. We're tweaking the sound, throwing out some effects, and getting this thing color graded, and we will be ready to give it to you. So then you could say, "Hey, you know what? I want to see the feature version of this," and help us get that made. So until next week, for Derek Lemaster and Lydia Judy, I'm Jamie Hiles. Remember, if you're going to scream bloody movies.